Hello and welcome to Art Rhode Island. I'm Martina Windels. Today we will look at artist residencies, and joining me in the studio are Ellen Strokosch, Executive Director of the Alliance of Artist Communities, a national umbrella organization representing approximately 1,000 artist residencies worldwide. Since 2002, the Alliance makes its home in Providence. Ellen Driscoll, an artist working in the public realm and the head of the sculpture department at the Rhode Island School of Design. She's recently completed Distant Mirrors, a changing installation which floated in the Monosquatucket River during the fall. And Nancy Friese, a painter and printmaker, and also a professor at the Rhode Island School of Design. Nancy Friese is one of the artists included in Network's 2011. Both Ellen and Nancy have attended several artist residencies during their careers. Welcome, and thank you all for coming here today.
Thanks.
Yes. Let's start with you, Caitlin. What is an artist residency?
An artist residency is really any place that provides dedicated time and space to artists of any discipline for the creation of new work.
So it's not limited to visual arts?
No, writers, choreographers, composers, filmmakers, playwrights, really any kind of creative artist. And the distinction is really that it's about a limited time and space for creation as opposed to some kind of permanent live-work spaces. So really a place that provides a really dedicated, focused time for artists and distinctly for the creation of new work as opposed to some performance residencies or teaching residencies.
So the function for the artist is to really focus on work?
Absolutely.
Both of you have gone to a bunch of them, so let's talk about specifics. Where did you go? Pick a couple and we'll talk about it.
Well, the first one that I went to is the MacDowell Colony, which is one of the oldest, if perhaps the oldest artist residency program in the United States.
And it's in New Hampshire, right?
It is in New Hampshire. It's in Peterborough, New Hampshire. And I was in my late 20s when I applied. And the entire decade had been grueling and dismal. And so I had a really demanding day job, and I applied as almost like my escape getaway plan. And I got accepted, but I couldn't go because of my job. I was working in the admissions office at Parsons School of Design. So I worked double, triple time to earn all the days of the 6 weeks that MacDowell had offered me. And I wrote this truly desperate letter saying, I can't come to the residency. Would you ever consider taking me again? They're like, yeah, we'll just postpone it until the spring. So I went.
No big deal.
Yeah,
come when you can.
And it was so amazing. It was like, I don't know, I sort of look back on, I think it was like fairy dust being sprinkled on you or something, because somebody was providing your meals, and I had this amazing studio, and I was able to just make drawings and sculpture, and it was a beautiful, amazing thing that happened to me. I'll never forget it.
So you went there for 6 weeks and worked.
That's all I did, yeah.
MacDowell does not just have visual artists though, right? So
no, they have the same array of kind of disciplines that Caitlin mentioned, but they've also expanded to include documentary filmmakers, nonfiction writers, and always in recent years, I mean, the fact that I was accepted in my late 20s is something that I've noticed is kind of a pattern at MacDowell. They have a real emphasis and an interest in young artists, emerging artists. So the age spectrum there tends to go from, you know, mid to late 20s all the way up into people who might be in their 80s. But the youngest, most emerging artists can still have a good shot at it there, getting in.
How many people are there when you are there? Like simultaneously?
It's actually a fluctuating population there, I would say between 15 and 30 people. Okay. So all the time that you are there in the month or 6 weeks, people are leaving and people are arriving. And I think it's about 250 people a year, I want to say, who are passing through.
And MacDowell runs year-round, right? Or
Yes,
do they
do.
close in the winter? Because
No,
some residencies are only seasonal, right?
Correct, yeah. There
So-
are a handful that are still just in the summer, like Skowhegan, some places like that, or Fine Arts Work Center that is just not in the summer.
Right, that's actually, that's another one you went to, right?
Yeah, actually, I got accepted to the Fine Arts Work Center while I was at MacDowell. So, you know, my luck really did start to change.
Residency hopping.
Yes. But, you know, actually, I had applied to the Fine Arts Work Center the year before and not gotten in. So I think one thing I would say to artists who are thinking about doing this is that you have to develop a little bit of scar tissue. In other words, if you get rejected, you should try again.
Okay.
So, you know, the Work Center was an amazing turning point, but if I had been that discouraged after not getting in the first time, then I never would have had that opportunity. So.
There you were longer, and you also did a significant amount of work. We have some still photographs of your work, and we're going to take a look at that, and maybe you can explain what we're looking at. I think it is of Distant Mirror, the piece that you made last fall.
Yeah, I was at the Fine Arts Work Center a very long time ago, so those are not the same images.
We're going to go fast forward now.
Yes, yeah.
So
This is two of the young women that I worked with to create Distant Mirrors washing the 200-pound bale of bottles with me.
that the whole piece is made of, right?
Yes, the entire piece is made from bottles that we got from the Rhode Island Resource Recovery Corporation. They made a custom bale out of their 1-ton bales that they normally have there, and we cleaned them and reconfigured them into the floating sculpture that was in the, actually it's the Providence River for 5 weeks.
Oh, not the Monasquatucket.
Yeah.
And
We-
here I said the complicated name, you know, practice.
Woonasquatucket, yes.
Could've just
We
stuck
took
with
the
Providence.
piece to the site with canoes along the Woonasquatucket,
Oh, okay.
and then
so
it becomes, I think, the
I
Providence
got
River.
that all
Yeah,
confused.
it's okay.
Let's move on to you. Where did you go for residency?
Actually, I had the same story as Ellen did. I applied to MacDowell, my first residency, and I couldn't afford to go. But then I
You
went
couldn't
on
afford to go as far as the time goes.
time and money, you know, subletting and all that. But I went on
Actually,
to do.
can I interrupt you for 1 second? I want to ask a question to you, money. Because it's very different rules for various different, some are free, some cost some money, some give you a stipend. So can you sort of briefly elaborate,
Yes.
and then we get back to you.
Yeah. I think of the ones in the U.S., about 2/3 are free, and of the other third, some of them charge some nominal fees. Every place is subsidized, heavily subsidized, even if they charge a fee. Some of the places that don't charge a fee also don't provide as much in terms of meals and materials and things like that. So, you know, the amount of support, some of it is financial, some of it comes out in other ways that still impacts you financially. So it's complicated.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, I mentioned that I couldn't go because of my job, and it sounds like that was a similar experience, but MacDowell has just started offering extra support to people to make up for the rent or those kinds
they
of
can
time
maintain their
away
life back
losses.
home
Yeah,
when-
they've just started offering extra support that applicants can apply for to help them cover those expenses while they're away from their, quote, normal lives.
And there are lots of places that have specific scholarships or stipends for people in a particular discipline or from a particular geographic region or things like that as well.
But sort of as a generalization, what do you get? A room to sleep, a studio, food, their lectures.
Every place is going to have a studio. Most have housing, though there are a number of residency programs that do not offer housing because they're supporting artists in their local community. Many provide meals, but certainly not all. There are others where you're on your own for meals. They may provide groceries for you, they may not. That varies a lot. Some provide other kinds of lectures, visiting artists and things like that. Others you're really on your own, and your time is your own, and you're working in solitude.
And you're working, and that's
so there's a pretty broad range of the kinds of support and other opportunities that are available to you.
So let's go back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I started that way, and then I went on to do over 10 residencies, and some of the most remarkable ones are kind of more unique. I'd say the most unique one I have been at was the World Trade Center's Worldviews Studioscape program. Because I'm a landscape painter, it was right in the heart of Manhattan. And
so just to clarify this, is this in the World Trade Towers?
Tower 1 on the 91st floor. That program was started by a painter, and then Lower Manhattan Cultural Center runs it and runs a version of it now too. But it was offered to perceptual painters. The 91st floor was just for painters, and the 92nd floor was for all disciplines. And it offered a 10,000 square foot studio.
And you went there for how long?
Well, I only went there for 3 months out of the 4. It was a total of 4 months. And there were 9 painters. And the thing that was nice about it was intergenerational, too. There was somebody in their mid-20s and somebody in their late 70s. So out of the 9, it was an incredible stretch of types of artists, and even though they were painters.
So this is, for your work specifically, this is kind of a switch. There you are from the landscape to the urban landscape as far as what you're looking at and what you're painting. Right?
I think some artists go to test themselves in different ways at residencies, whether it's to test themselves in quantity, but for me it was the point of view.
Yeah.
And all of the artists in that program were there because of the spectacular view and the unusual and remarkable situation.
We actually have a video of your landscape work, so let's take a look at that.
It's great to be outside and use your whole body and paint, large. It's a real feeling of freedom. You really learn a lot when you're drawing and painting and trying to transfer what you're looking at onto a two-dimensional field. The value of landscape art is it gives you a dynamic space that represents an experience that's common to us all. One of the things I enjoy doing is working really large in landscape. The landscapes I love are the large historical landscapes. And I'm planning a series of very large paintings, maybe 10, 12 feet or 14-foot paintings. When I paint large, I need to find a place where I can store the paintings. And the Griswold has said I can house my painting in their museum, in their storage room. I'm really eager and hungry to do another large-scale series.
Different landscape than you get out of the window of the World Trade Center there.
True.
Now, on your resume, it's also mentioned you made your own residency. And it talks about, I think it was Westerly, right?
Yeah, Westerly.
So can you explain what that means? I made my own residency?
Well, some artists are doing that. They're finding an institution or a nonprofit agency or a corporation or some agency that will house them as an artist in residency, artist in residence. And I don't know what category they fall under in terms of the alliance, but this was an opportunity to paint in a local area for me, and I didn't want to just arbitrarily choose a place. I went to the Land Trust Council and found a land trust that invited me to be able to paint on their site. So I did that for several years, and they gave me a very big studio so I could house my paintings there and transport them easily to their sites. There was no stipend, it was just a support agency.
And there's no application process, obviously, because you just said, I want to do this, and they were receptive.
I put a proposal out, and then they vetted it and met with their, their council and approved it. So I had some process through it. And then I stayed
So does that
there.
happen? Does that people kind of, I need time and space and I'm just going to invent it? Does that happen a lot?
I don't know how...
I mean, you deal with the organized side of this.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I've heard from a number of other artists who have done that, like Nancy, who have had a relationship with with a local art center or with a nature preserve or even with a company that has some kind of creative aspect to the business and have kind of embedded themselves within that environment. That being said, there are 500 residency programs in the U.S. that are already existing, so there are lots of opportunities that most artists are going to look for those kinds of opportunities they can apply to, rather than try to maybe start
reinvent the wheel
their
there.
own.
Yeah. Well, in Rhode Island, there isn't that much in the way of residency, so if you want to stick to home, and I know you said family and not being away necessarily,
yeah, for sure,
is sort of a concern.
Yeah, the printmaker residency at AS220 is probably the most kind of traditionally structured one that we have here in Rhode Island, where they have a visiting artist in residence come
Every year, I think,
for a shorter period of time. Exactly.
Now, both of you also went overseas. And I would like to, maybe each of you can pick one of the residencies that stands out and talk about that a little bit.
Well, yes, I have traveled to a number of other countries to do work. And as a sculptor, let's just say I don't travel light. I always have
all those milk bottles,
a lot of big stuff, yes. So that's something that is interesting to think about, is to not just to be going to another country and sort of acclimating yourself culturally, but also to just think about what you're going to make and where it's going to go after you make it. And so, for example, I have been making these pieces in the last 5 years that are all made with American plastic that ends up in recycling centers or landfills. And 3 years ago, actually it was 2 years ago, I went to Ireland for a residency, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to, transport Irish trash across international borders. So what I did was I asked the people at the residency to facilitate getting me access to the only oil refinery in Ireland. And they did do this to my great amazement. And I spent basically half a day in this ConocoPhillips facility, which supplies oil for that country. It's a very small country, only 4 million people. And they were welcoming me with open arms.
So they helped to set this up before you ever got there.
Artist with a camera, no problem. Take as many pictures as you want. This is what we do here. Isn't it exciting and wonderful? And I had this moment when I was there, like, why did I have to go to Ireland to go to an oil refinery? And I went, oh, right, because an American oil refinery probably wouldn't welcome an artist in. So I made some very, very big drawings on that residency, which could be rolled into a tube and taken home as looking like golf clubs or skis, when they check it. So, yes.
So, do you run into the same problem? You have to bring your paintings home, right?
That's right. I used a ski bag, too, for my big paintings from Japan.
Well, I was just going to say, you went to Japan.
I went on another unique, I think, residency. It's by a independent federal agency. Japan-U.S. Friendship Commission sponsors 5 U.S. artists from any discipline in the arts to go to Japan for 6 months. I think it might be down to 3 months now. And then in turn, 5 Japanese artists come to the United States. And I
so
think
it's a cultural exchange?
Exchange. And I was able to bring my daughter she was a toddler, so I'm always interested in residencies where family can intersect, or I used to be, because that's a big chunk of your artistic life if you have a family to miss out on residencies. So I'm interested in those. And then in Japan, I was able to live in a neighborhood, and I was able to just have an ordinary life for 6 months and still produce
So
work.
This was not a place, but you lived in a town or in a city.
Right, on the western side of Tokyo. But I had the support. They have International House of Japan supported the residency over there. So I did meet the other artists that traveled around, and part of my role was to travel during those 6 months.
And was it 5 visual artists, or was it all disciplines?
There was a playwright and a dancer, and my year, every year it's different. I imagine every year there's one visual artist that goes.
So is that common that places put you in an apartment that there's not, like, I mean, McDowell is a location where everybody lives together, basically.
Yeah, there are a number of other places too where you are really sort of embedding yourself within a community or within a city, and not as common as the places where it's sort of a campus. But yeah, there are other places like that, particularly outside the U.S., where you're put up in an apartment, and there may be other artists that are part of that program, so at least you have a cohort that's with you nearby.
How many international residencies do you represent at the Alliance, or are members of your organization?
We have maybe 30 or so that are members, but we work closely with RESIDENCIES and Trans Artists, which are kind of our sister organizations internationally. And there are, you know, 1,000 maybe that we know of outside the U.S. I'm sure there are many more that we don't know about.
So many opportunities.
Absolutely.
Actually, I'm going to ask you specifically about Italy. Rockefeller Foundation, Bellagio. You went there, right?
I did, yeah. That one is interesting and quite different from the ones that every one that we've talked about so far is each quite different from the next. That one is actually much more a community of scholars. They have maybe 1 or 2 artists at a time, although, again, there might be a spread of disciplines. So when I was there was a novelist from India, a playwright from the Philippines.
So a very broad
2 textile artists from Thailand, and me. And then the rest were all academics, very scholarly.
Makes for good dinner conversation.
Well, and that's...
And good dinners in
well,
Italy.
Interestingly enough, that particular residency essentially requires that you go to dinner. That's the only thing they ask of you. And they ask you to dress for dinner as well. So they don't want the canvas spattered jeans and the flip-flops at those dinners. And yes, I guess it's social engineering. They're trying to, in a very lovely way, they're trying to engineer interdisciplinary conversations. And because it's the Rockefeller Foundation, in the month that I was there were 2 separate conferences that were very intense, short, focused weekend conferences where people really came in from all over the world. And one of them was focused on the dramatic arts, you know, tiny little puppet theaters, and it was very fascinating to be there.
So this exposes you to people and topics, subjects, whatnot, that you would not encounter here.
Yeah, in my day-to-day life, I don't think I ever would have met my friend Gita, the novelist from Delhi,
right. So it's
who I met there.
It's providing the space to work and the time to work, but also other people doing really interesting things and mixing that all up.
Mixing it up, yeah.
So for your career, and this is geared at the 2 of you, for your career, what is the role of residencies? I mean, I understand the making space and time, but it's also the function of an award, right? And recognizing you're doing work that we want to support. And so when you go to the Rockefeller Foundation, that's a real bonus on your resume, right? Sort of career building. No?
I hope this doesn't sound disingenuous, but I don't really think that way.
Okay, well, that's fine.
I just don't think that way. Nancy?
Well, I
so
think
it's not like...
No, I think it's a validation. I think we both agree it's a validation in some way of your effort. But, and I think it's more oblique or obtuse than maybe how you connect beyond that. But I would agree with Ellen, and I think one of the goals is intellectual growth. In going to these, you are gathering information, and it's not just a challenge for your work, it's a challenge for you to move beyond your small world into a larger world, especially the international ones.
But I also want to say that whenever, I'll speak for myself again here, I think whenever an artist is confronted with a beautiful gift of time, you also confront the potential for your own failure. So, you know, it's not just a bed of roses. You're there alone with your thoughts, and you have far fewer distractions. And it allows for greater risk, therefore,
but that's a good thing.
With every greater risk is a chance of a greater failure. So you make contact with those more existential realities of the life path that you've chosen.
Now, to wrap this up, I would like to ask all of you, what kind of advice do you have for artists who are thinking about applying for an artist residency? What should they consider? What should they think about? Start with you.
I would really encourage artists not just to think about the famous places, not just the best known places, not what their professors or their friends tell them is the best place to go. You know, there are over 1,000 around the world. There are good places for everybody to go, and it's going to be different for every person. So to really do your homework and to think about the kind of atmosphere you want to be in, the kind of things you want access to, the kind of experience you want to have.
Ellen?
Well, I guess I would go back to that story of like not getting in the first time, and just sort of pick yourself up off the floor and give it another try.
Be persistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you should set your priorities ahead clearly, whether you want to be alone, whether you want to be in a community, whether you want to be rurally, whether you want to be in the middle of a city. You know, you really need to vet those carefully before you apply, so you're not mismatching. And once you're there, I think you have to immerse yourself positively.
Okay, and Caitlin, I'm sure your organization can help with figuring out what people should do.
Absolutely.
What's the, does the Alliance have a website?
We sure do. It's artistcommunities.org.
Thank you for joining me here today. Until next time, I'm Martina Windels for Art Rhode Island. Goodbye.